My first really dangerous bite was in 1987 in the Amazon. I was on a research station in the jungle, 6 hours from the nearest town. That one nearly killed me.
分叉的舌头，致命的毒液，光洁的躯体，斑斓的花纹。蛇类这个不走寻常路的演化奇迹，可以说是最有话题度的陆生脊椎动物类群。神出鬼没的它们，至今身上还有大量的未解之谜等待我们去探索。不过，想要拍好它们，讲述它们的故事，从来不是件容易事。你不仅要远离城市的喧嚣，深入蛮荒之地，更可能要面对它们的致命反击。即便你做好了应对危险的心理准备，也可能在野外一无所获。所以，想拍蛇类纪录片，在影像设备尚不发达的30多年前，几乎是个不可能完成的任务。但是，却有这样一个人，带着一支团队，花了10多年，跑了几10个国家，为600多种两栖爬行类拍摄了影响世界的纪录片。那么，他是如何踏上这条路的？在这过程中，又有多少次与死神擦肩而过呢？大家好，我是冬青。在上一集，我亲自前往英国，带大家认识了初代蛇王，世界最知名的两爬学家和野生动物纪录片主持人 Mark。我们不仅聊到了他的卓越成就，还介绍了他的最新著作，讲解了世界600种蛇类分布分类，以及配有1:1大小图片的蛇类博物馆。如果你已经收到了这本书，欢迎在评论区分享你的读后感。我将抽取3位获赞最高者，赠送欧谢教授的原版亲签贺卡。如果你还没看过这本《蛇图鉴》毕业制作，可以点击屏幕框下或评论区置顶链接，以5.8折聚会价入手。那么，在与全世界这么多蛇类打交道的过程中，欧谢教授是否被毒蛇咬过呢？在上世纪那个没有手机和网络的时代，他又是怎样在医疗资源严重匮乏的丛林中一次次的化险为夷呢？现在有请奥谢教授在今年的世界蛇类日为大家讲述他那多次惊心动魄的蛇伤经历。
If you say I've been bitten by X number, it sounds like you're bragging, and I'm not bragging about them. I will talk about a snake bite when it's relevant. So I'm not ashamed of them. They're accidents, they do happen, especially if you work with venomous snakes, but I don't wear them like Boy Scout merit badges, you know? I won't give a figure. I've had a number of snake bites. I've had some really serious bites that I've nearly died from. I was bitten by a pit viper on the Komodo Islands, and the film crew were ready to medevac me to Bali by helicopter, and the helicopter was going to leave Bali and come and get me, and I'm sleeping on deck on a boat on the Komodo Islands with my hands strapped because I've been bitten by a pit viper. And they said, they came through on the radio, the helicopter has to leave now or it won't get back before dark. And I said, tell it not to come, because they'll medevac me to Bali, but they won't medevac me back. And I'll have left my film crew in the Komodo Islands and they won't be able to finish the film because I'll be in Bali. So I said, I'm fine, I'm not going to die. You can stand the helicopter down. And I didn't go. I got bitten by a stiletto snake in South Africa and went into a hospital about 1 o'clock in the morning, followed by my director with his camera. When I went into the hospital, was in total darkness. I walked in through the doors. I'd been bitten on both hands by this stiletto snake because my friend had said, Cape wolf snake, so I grabbed it. It wasn't, it was a stiletto snake. He'd misidentified it in the darkness on the road. So I'd now got 2 really painful hands. And so I opened the doors with my elbows and walked in, and these 2 black security guards jumped up and they go, oh, obviously I'm a patient with painful hands, so they let me pass. Then my director came in with a small camera like this, and they went to stop him. And I said, no, it's okay. He's my biographer. He follows me everywhere. And they let him through. And we filmed in the hospital, and I took my discharge. I didn't stay because the doctor wanted to do cryotherapy. He wanted to pack my hands with ice. There's no antivenom for this snake. It hurts like blazes. There's no antivenom. You just got to wait for the swelling to go down, and I wanted painkillers. He gave me the painkillers, yeah, but he wanted to pack my hands with ice. And I said, no, you don't do that. That's medieval. We don't do that for snakebite. He was a Cuban doctor. He came from an island with no front fang venomous snakes. I'm from Britain. We have the adder. So I'm already one ahead. right? So I said, no, you don't do that. So he basically said, well, if you won't have my treatment, get out of my hospital. So I left. And I had 2 days of hallucinations with this because it was so painful, but they eventually went down and my hands went back to normal. And I knew I wasn't going to die, but I just didn't want to lose any fingers. Look, can you count them? They're all still there. I've got all my digits. 2 of my friends have lost fingers. I've touched wood, still got all of mine. But I have had snake bites that aren't quite as humorous. Near fatal rattlesnake bite in 1995 when I was working with a big canebrake rattlesnake, fatter than my wrist, bit me in the hand, and that one nearly killed me. Nearly died in the ambulance on the way to hospital from that one. And my first really, really dangerous bite was in 1987 in the Amazon. And I was bitten on a research station by a small rattlesnake, and I had to have the anti-venom in the night. But unfortunately, the fridge didn't work because it was run off a generator, and the anti-venom was cold chain broken. So no doctor would generally administer it because it's been above the temperature it should be, quite a bit above, I think. And I had to have the anti-venom because the swelling was right up my arm, and we didn't have a doctor. I discussed it with the nurse. She put up a drip. She put the anti-venom into the drip, started the infusion, and within 2 minutes of me having the start of the anti-venom, I went blind. Not black blind, white blind. Think of a television with no aerial, just white noise. I'd lost my vision, and I don't know if it's for 10 minutes, 10 days or forever. And I'm in the jungle, blind, with snake venom going through my body, and the anti-venom not doing me a lot of good either. So she stopped the anti-venom, and then she had to give me adrenaline to combat the reaction that I'd had, and then she could start the anti-venom again, because I still need it, but at a slower infusion. And I was able to have that anti-venom. And then we're so used to these phones, there it is. We're so used to these. Sat phones, mobile phones, cell phones, the internet, everything's immediate. If you want to talk to somebody back in China, you could contact them now, this very minute, and speak to them in real time. But in the 1980s, you couldn't do that. I was on a research station in the jungle, 6 hours from the nearest town, on a good day, by truck. Right. We had shortwave radios, not dissimilar to the ones used in World War II for military to communicate between each other. That radio ran off a car battery, which drained quickly. We would do 2 radio checks. We would do a radio check in the morning at 6 o'clock. We do a radio check in the evening, in the afternoon at 6 o'clock. Those radio checks would last about 10 minutes. And you would say, right, we've run out of beer, can you send some on the next supply run? Or they would say, we're sending you 2 entomologists, can you get a room on the station ready? This was with Boa Vista in the town, 6 hours away. So I got bitten at 6:30 in the afternoon. 20 minutes after the radio had been turned off, 11.5 hours before it'd be turned back on again. We could turn ours on, but there'd be nobody at the other end. They wouldn't know in Boa Vista to turn the radio on until 6 o'clock in the morning. So I had to survive the night. So I had to have that anti-venom. When they did come online at 6 o'clock the following morning, the radio message went out that I'd been bitten. They needed to set up a Casevac. So they started to set that in motion. And eventually by 8 o'clock, it was all set up. So I was carried out of the room I was in, and we only had 1 vehicle on the island. This was an island in the river, big river that branches and comes together and creates this big island, 100,000 hectares. We're at a research centre at the one end of it, and that's an old Brazilian Jeep called a Jeg. And while they're setting up the medevac, some of the guys on the station had got a set of tools, and they'd taken all the seats, except the driver's seat, out of the Jeg, and they'd put a mattress in. So then, when it was ready to go, I was carried out and put on the mattress. They drove down the causeway 2 kilometres to the river. There was an Amerindian boat there, a dugout canoe. They put me into the canoe. The Amerindians paddled me across the river to the other side. There was a Banderanchi Land Cruiser sitting waiting for me. They picked me up, they put me in the Banderanchi. They drove me up to a fazenda, a ranch, and then we heard the aircraft coming, and the aircraft had been dispatched. What had taken the time was they'd taken all the seats out of it, except the pilot and one of our people who knew where the research station was. All the seats, little Cessna type aircraft, and they'd got a mattress in there. And when that arrived, they picked me up, they put me on the mattress, and the plane took off. And it flew to Boa Vista. I was hoping to have a look at what the area looked like from the sky, but I was reacting again to the antivenom. I was having hives, itching all over, terrible. And so I was given more adrenaline, and I was out. I woke up when we arrived in Boa Vista. When I got there, I staggered down the steps of the aircraft, and they go, no, don't walk, don't walk. And they brought this ambulance. It was an estate car ambulance. It could have belonged to the Addams family. It was like one of these old American Cadillacs. If it had been sprayed black, it would have made a very good hearse. But it was sprayed white, so it was an ambulance. And they put me in the back of that. And it's because it's a state car. I mean, I'm like that, and the roof's about there. And then this started off for the hospital. And the sirens were like banshees, which are screaming Irish witches. Really, oh, that's when the chill went through me, the sound of that noise. It was a worrying time, because this is 1987, when the AIDS epidemic has just started. And in a lot of countries, they reuse needles, they just sterilize them. They don't dispose of them because they've only got so many. And I've been warned that in Brazil at that time, there was a lot of boil the needles and use them on the next patient. So whatever you end up getting AIDS. So I thought, well, this isn't a good idea. And they've got me onto this ward, and everybody was on a drip. And they came to give me injections and to put a drip up. And I don't speak great Portuguese, but I'm thinking, I'm not having this. There's an international language that means go away. And I was standing on my bed with my fists, threatening to punch the first person that came near me with anything pointy. And you're not sticking needles in me, thank you, no. And they thought, leave the stupid gringo alone. Let him. And the next day, I managed to get discharged from hospital. And I was out. And 2 days later, I was back on the station. And there was a massive party. All the Brazilians and the British and the Americans and the Colombians, we all had this massive party, and there was loads of alcohol, except my Brazilian girlfriend would not let me have any, because she said I was a patient and I mustn't drink. So I couldn't.
虽然奥谢教授多次以身犯险，但他的目的其实是为了让世人尊重这些与我们不同的生物。但消除偏见是个长期战斗，因此他在告别荧幕后撰写了这本《蛇类博物馆》及众多科普读物。他深知，只有让更多人认识他们、了解他们，我们才可以消除恐惧，创造一个人蛇共存的世界。所以在蛇类博物馆中，你可以查到更多关于这几种致命毒蛇的信息，还可以通过下方的相近物种认识与它们相关的其他蛇类，进一步拓展你的知识面。但能编写这样一本巨著的背后，一定不只有危险的故事。那么，欧谢教授最喜欢的蛇类又是什么呢？它们之间又发生过什么故事呢？
My favourite snake is the king cobra. It is not because it's the biggest venomous snake in the world. That isn't the reason. The reason is anybody who has worked with king cobras will tell you there is something going on behind those eyes. I kept a king cobra when I was at the safari park. I grew up to a 10-foot female. She was a great animal to work with. She would recognise us. King cobras do appear to have some intelligence. And there were two members of staff, myself and another member of staff, who would go into her enclosure. She knew us, let her know we were coming, and we'd go in and she'd just watch. If there was a new member of staff with us, she'd be watching them because she didn't recognise them. When we needed to take her out, I'd take her out on the floor in the venomous handling room. She'd sit there and hood. They would do the work in her enclosure. Then I'd turn around and she'd go back in herself. She was amazing. And I made a film about king cobras when I made O'Shea's Big Adventure. And I caught a female king cobra. We were going to test an idea. Big male king cobras are said to growl, a deep-throated growl. They also, when they want to threaten, will show one fang, just show a fang, which suggests that they're thinking about what they're doing. But what's this growl for? We don't know. Well, we got recordings of a male growling, and I had Professor Bruce Young, who's done a lot of work in this area from the United States, with me on the film, and we caught this female king cobra, and we built a big enclosure bigger than this room with tent sides, tarpaulins, and we put her in there, and there's a microphone in there, and we were going to play the king cobra growl at her and see if she reacted, and we left her to settle down. We left her for quite some time, and we're watching, waiting, and she came over and she climbed up the side, and one of the team called, Mark, look up. And I looked up, and she was above me, looking at me like that. So I pushed her back into the enclosure. She came over again, and we'd got little windows cut in the side to watch her, and she's watching me, and I was talking to the cameraman, and I looked back, and there's this king cobra, and she started to do this, and when she looked, I saw her pupils go like that, and I thought, she's focusing on my face. Her eyes changed. I saw them. So she knew the difference between the side of her face and the front of her face. And I thought, this is amazing. And she started to sway. She's looking at me. And I swear, she was asking me, why have you caught me? What did I do to you? Why have you caught me? And I felt so guilty. So for me, the absolute best part of that film was when we finished, and I took her and I carried her to a creek in the jungle, and I let her go, and she swam down through the creek over a little waterfall and out of my life, and I felt that was good, that was right. I'm not really a spiritual person, but I would call that experience spiritual. That's why I like king cobras. There's something going on behind those eyes. I'm almost sure that there's thought processes, and if there is, that's pretty amazing.
正如他这些不寻常的经历一样，奥谢教授的求学之路也非比寻常，而他的成长经历恰恰可以为我的广大观众提供重要参考。任何一位想在两趴相关的各领域有所发展的观众，都不要错过接下来的内容。
When you're 11 years old in Britain, you do an exam 11 plus. That determines whether you go to a grammar school or a comprehensive or a secondary modern. And secondary modern schools were sort of really for people who are going to work in factories. You can't fail your 11 plus. You either pass it or you don't pass it, which is a kind way of saying you failed it. Well, I didn't pass it. So I went to a secondary modern school, which only had up to a certain 5th year. You know, I could only do certain qualifications. But my parents at the time were very kind, and they said, better top of your class in secondary modern than bottom of the class in the grammar school. And that's quite true. So I did well there, and then I went to another school to do my upper 6 years, to do the qualifications I needed to get into university. And I did not get on with the head of biology. And so I walked out of school one Friday, went to the hospital where I did voluntary work on the Saturday, and I said, I've left school, can I have a job? And I was probably about 16, and they said, you've worked in accident emergency, haven't you? And I said, yes. They said, okay, you start on Monday. And so I worked in accident emergency in the National Health Service for about 7 years. And then I decided I wanted to go back to academia. And so I don't have the qualification. I'd got naval zoology. I didn't have the qualifications for university. So I thought, well, I'll go and be a teacher, like my parents. So I went for an interview to be a teacher. And in the interview, they said to me, you don't want to be a teacher, do you? I said, no. They said, you want to study biology? I said, yes. They said, there's somebody here you should meet. And they introduced me to a Dr. Lintonbon. And I sat with him for a few minutes, talking about what I wanted to do with my life. And he said, you know, you've impressed me. I'm prepared to offer you a place on our Bachelor's with Honours degree in Applied Sciences at the Polytechnic of Wolverhampton. And I said, yes, please. and it's all from there. I went to the Polytechnic, which was a sort of university in its day, and learnt to think like an academic. Everything has come out of that. So the funny thing in life is you come to T-junctions or crossroads in life and you think, what shall I do? Shall I take that job or shall I do that? Take the one that sounds the most exciting, because if you don't, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you had. If you take the easy option, more of the same, you're just never going to be happy. If you take it and it doesn't work out, you can go back and carry on. And I've come to those junctions 2 or 3 times in my life, and I've taken the one, like getting into television was like that. You know, opportunities come along at the least expected moment, and you should take them with both hands and do your level best. So I ended up now I'm a professor at a university, University of Wolverhampton, which markets itself as the University of Opportunity. And it certainly is. It was my opportunity when it was a polytechnic. Yeah, education's a wonderful thing. And the thing about doing a degree, it isn't just about learning facts. It's maturing and learning to think outside the box, learning how to problem solve, learning at different ways to come at a problem, learning how to analyze data, learning how to speak to an audience, learning how to write in a way that you are conveying information to an audience. These are important skills that if you want to become a professional, you will need at some point. So going to university and picking those up early and then practicing with them is very, very important, and it sets you ahead of the crowd. So I would say education is the key to most things in life that involve communication and thinking and so forth. And so if somebody wants to become a professional herpetologist, professional ornithologist, mammologist, entomologist, any kind of ologist, yeah, education.
感谢奥谢教授的慷慨分享。如果他的经历启发了你，让你也想在专业领域有所建树，那你一定要关注相关的学术会议。在两爬学界最高等级的国际性大会，莫过于每3到4年在世界各地轮换举办的世界两爬学大会了。今年的举办地在马来西亚。我替各位问了奥谢教授在下个月大会上的演讲主题，现在你不用飞到马来西亚，也不用缴纳报名费，就可以提前知道他的发言内容。
Of course, the biggest event every 4 years is the World Congress of Herpetology, and one of them was held in China. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to that one. I've been to 5 of the 9 so far. The 10th World Congress of Herpetology is taking place in Kuching in Sarawak, and it's in early August. And I'm planning to attend. I know that quite a few Chinese herpetologists are coming from Chengdu and various other places. I'm hoping to present 2 short papers, 2 presentations. One on the Papuan elapid genus Toxicocalamus, which is a genus that I've worked on a great deal. I've described 5 new species, resurrected 3 from synonymy, and I'm working on a couple more species, well, several more species actually at the moment. So I'm presenting on Toxicocalamus, which is that although they're elapids, they're not like cobras at all. They're more like a coral snake. They're quite secretive, and they feed entirely on earthworms, which is quite an odd diet for a venomous snake. The other presentation I'll be doing will be on the Archbold expeditions, which were some American expeditions in the 1930s and the 1950s, led by Richard Archbold, who was an heir to Standard Oil, which is now ExxonMobil. He was an heir to the fortune, so he was a very rich young man, and he very wisely put a lot of that money into running biological expeditions, collecting specimens for the American Museum of Natural History in New York. So he wasn't quite leading the playboy lifestyle. He was using his money much more sensibly for science. And there were 7 expeditions to New Guinea, to both the side controlled by Australia, the east, which became Papua New Guinea, and the side controlled by the Dutch, which became part of Indonesia. And they collected a huge number of specimens, many of which were the first specimens of particular snakes or lizards or frogs ever collected. They were primarily there for mammals and birds and so forth, but they did collect reptiles and amphibians, and I've been working on their collections for some time, and I shall be presenting on the first 3 of those expeditions, which took place in the 1930s.
好的，关于这场世界级的2爬学盛会，届时我也会在现场为你进行报道。下一集我会和奥谢教授一同前往他的研究室，为你揭秘描述一个新物种背后要做的工作。除此之外，奥谢教授还会分享他的影像设备和重要藏书。对于想要从事科研或者科普的你，一定不要错过。本集点赞过5000，即可解锁这些宝贵信息。我是冬青，我相信我们很快就会再见。